Good evening, gentlemen. It's everyone's favorite Emmett Willems cameo. About 3 months ago, I was remaining safe from the COVID outbreak by hanging out in a bookstore. Typically safe behavior for a pandemic in mid-swing, when a certain book caught my eye. Now, I'm not that big of a reader, ever since elementary school when I was rated 4 grades above my level and all the teachers would only let me take novels, when all my friends were allowed to take comic books. But this specific book intrigued me. The book in question being Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. I always was a big fan of Thor from the Marvel Universe growing up, and being able to read some of the well-researched stories of his adventure with Loki would be a dream of mine. Until the time of writing, I've probably read and reread this book close to half a dozen times, and what I find so fascinating about it is you can see the stories, the lives the Vikings lived. From their religion, and any religion for that matter, you can make out the lives and aspirations that the elders or scribes were trying to forge in the cold, desolate wasteland of Norway and, God forbid, Denmark. So, using the Norse as a baseline example, I'm going to show you that you can infer a people's lifestyle from just their belief system, as just like any story, it has a message behind it. The Norse didn't really write all that much, and the stuff they did was in rune stones. Most of what we know is from Snorri Sturluson, who lived hundreds of years after the time of the Vikings. So there certainly will be some themes and aspects of Christianity, and a lot was lost, but what we do have is certainly enough. In the creation story, Odin and his brothers, Vili and Ve, slay the almighty Ymir, the first giant, and from his body they create the world. His body became the soil, bones to mountains, teeth to rocks, blood and sweat to the water of the seas and rivers. The skull became the sky, and the brains of Ymir became the clouds. Now, I hear people already typing in the comments, big whoop, the 3 brothers killed some big guy and made Earth. Which, I have to say, please let me finish my point. The Vikings were famous raiders and pirates, raiding everywhere from Bulgaria to Canada in their heyday. To pull off these feats, they would need some excellent coordinations between soldiers and a strong fundamental level of trust between the men next to them. Now, call it a stretch, but I think the message of this small part of the creation story is trying to show that brotherhood was the most important aspect of their life, and to make a brother out of each man you serve beside was the ultimate goal. There isn't really a source saying the Vikings valued brotherhood besides another story that says that, in the words of Loki's son, the worst thing one brother could do to another would be to betray his brother. For a brother to murder a brother as Hod killed Balder, that is abominable. Suffice to say, the Norse didn't really want any kinslayings to slow them down from raiding monasteries. In Freya's unusual wedding, Thor loses his hammer after an ogre king steals it. He promises to the Asgardians that he'd return the hammer as long as he can marry Frey, the most beautiful goddess. After discussing amongst themselves, Frey adamantly refused to marry the ogre. Can't imagine why. This leads to Thor dressing up as Frey to get the hammer back. But that's beyond the point. Now, according to natmis.dk, which I'm not really sure what that means, but I'm pretty sure it's an official site from Denmark, women were viewed a lot more equally than most of their European neighbors. They had a lot more freedom of choice and opportunity. Some women were even entrepreneurs and started textile businesses. Now, if that doesn't speak volumes to you, I'm not entirely sure what would. You're meaning to tell me that the women of big bearded raiding pirates had more freedom than a majority of European civilizations, some of which are the most advanced and developed countries on Earth today? That isn't even mentioning that they can also, most of the time, choose who they can marry. And although parents do have some decision in the matter, they certainly also have some sort of agency there. Love has been a question to most civilizations whose first thought was to think about menial things like, what is love? Or, are numbers real? The Vikings tackled the worth of love in the story of Gerd and Frey. Essentially, Frey feels he is missing something in life, but doesn't know what it is. He goes to Odin's hall and sits on the Allfather's chair, which allows him to see all the realms. He sees a beautiful giant named Gerd, who he insists he wants to marry. He tells his servant to go and inform her, but the servant wants a prize, Sumarbrander, the mighty blade of Frey, which can fight on its own. It was rumored that the sword could even defeat Surtur, the fire giant of Muspelheim, the fire realm. And even though Surtur was destined to kill Frey, Frey accepted. He married Gerd, and all was well in the marriage. Now, I'm not here to judge the choices of a god, but if I had the choice of turning the tide of the final battle between the gods and Loki's forces, or some girl, you'd bet your bottom dollar I'd keep that sword. This implies that the Vikings had a large focus on marriage and childbearing, and according to historycollection.com, it was. You can check my sources in the description below. Now, in the Norwegian mountains and tundras, there isn't much room for agriculture. Who would have thought that a bunch of stony mountainous terrain coupled with negative 30-degree temperature almost constantly wouldn't really be sustainable for corn, wheat, barley, or rice? But whatever. So, where is a Vikings raiding party, known for their amazing longboats and large coastlines, supposed to get their food? In the story of the last days of Loki, the gods Kvasir the Wise and Loki both independently invent the net to be able to catch a salmon. The salmon in question actually being Loki, and why Loki was a salmon I'll have to explain a 3-hour-long story, so just rest assured he's a salmon trying to hide from Kvasir. The story also explains the biology of salmon, and that it has a smaller tail because Thor gripped it hard enough to affect all the salmon. The theme of fishing also appears in Thor and Hymir's fishing expedition, where Thor again meets Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. Fishing was hugely important, not only for the Vikings of old, but the Scandinavians of today. One of Sweden's most infamous dishes is that of the pickled herring, a fish that's been marinating in a jar of vinegar for a week. If that doesn't tickle you fancy, I'm not sure what does. In the end of times, the Aesir gods will battle the forces of chaos led by Loki. Aiding Loki will be the legions of Hel, Hel of which being his daughter. The legions of Hel are those who died unworthy deaths of sickness and age, and on the side of Odin is the Einherjar, or the Army of One, in Old Norse. And these are the soldiers who died in battle and worthy deaths. This shows that the ultimate goal of every Viking was to die in battle. The entire point of living in the Viking's eye was to die in battle and participate in the final battle next to their Allfather. If that isn't metal, I don't know what is. So yeah, what a weird group of pirates, huh? Now, this method of examining a religion to infer a lifestyle is practically replicable for almost every single civilization that's existed. Some of the more modern ones might need a little bit of considering because there haven't been that many new religions, since there's only been like 3 in the past 100 years that's been accepted, but whatever. We can see the historical significance in mundane things like fishing or knitting to the general population of just about any civilization, past or present. Once more, my sources are in the description. That is all for today, and thank you for watching.